United Nations, New York, September 27, 2025. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov used his appearance at the United Nations to launch a blistering attack on Germany's defence policies, accusing Berlin of reviving militaristic traditions that, he warned, echo its darkest historical chapter. Speaking to reporters after his address to the UN General Assembly, Lavrov cast Germany's recent steps to expand its defence posture as a dangerous turn for Europe. The press conference took place shortly after Lavrov's speech at the General Assembly. Seated beside Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova, the veteran diplomat responded to questions from international journalists and elaborated on Moscow's fears of what it sees as Europe's drift toward militarization under German leadership. Lavrov's remarks were framed by growing tension between Russia and the European Union over the war in Ukraine and NATO's security posture. His focus, however, was squarely on Germany's current government under Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Lavrov accused the German leader of seeking to reshape Europe's defence order in a way that reminded Moscow of the 1930s. Sergei Lavrov said his goal, the Chancellor proudly declared, is to make Germany once again Europe's leading military power. And when someone in a country that committed the crimes of Nazism, fascism, the Holocaust and genocide says that Germany must become a great military power again, that demonstrates an atrophied historical memory, and that is extremely dangerous. The Russian foreign minister's tone was one of grave warning. He suggested that Europe's largest economy was not merely rearming in response to new security challenges, but was deliberately stepping into a role that history had already judged as catastrophic. Lavrov took direct aim at the German Chancellor's recent public statements. He accused Merz of trying to normalize a state of quasi-war in Europe while pushing for constitutional reforms that would give Germany more leeway to expand its military capabilities. Lavrov said, "Merz repeated yesterday, I think, that we are not yet at war, but that we are no longer at peace. The militaristic rhetoric is growing louder every day there." His famous quote, which he has used many times, is that he has pushed through constitutional amendments which now allow them to invest more in armaments, infrastructure development and military potential. For Lavrov, such comments went beyond routine policy announcements. They signalled, in his view, a fundamental shift in Europe's security thinking, one that Moscow regards as not just threatening but ideologically provocative. The sharpest point in Lavrov's critique came when he explicitly tied contemporary German policy to the legacy of the Third Reich. Lavrov warned, "Regarding the militarization of Germany, we have repeatedly expressed our very deep concerns. This is not only an ongoing process of remilitarization, there are also clear signs of a revival of Nazism." This claim, echoing long-standing Kremlin talking points, underscored Russia's narrative that the West's military support for Ukraine and its bolstering of NATO are part of a broader confrontation rooted in ideology. For many Western observers, such assertions are seen as inflammatory propaganda. Yet, for Lavrov, the comparison to Nazi Germany was central to his argument that Europe's current security trajectory carries echoes of the past. The Russian diplomat went further, invoking the spectre of Adolf Hitler's ambitions for continental domination. Lavrov stated, "Why is this happening? Probably for the same purpose that Hitler had in mind, to bring all of Europe under his control and attempt to inflict a strategic defeat. In Hitler's case on the Soviet Union, in the case of modern Germany and the rest of the main soloists in the EU and NATO on the Russian Federation." The statement underscored Moscow's view that today's geopolitical tensions are not merely the product of the war in Ukraine or NATO expansion, but part of a recurring historical struggle in which Russia sees itself as the defender against Western hegemony. In a separate remark during the press conference, Lavrov issued a blunt warning against any potential military action on Russian territory. Lavrov cautioned, "If there are attempts to shoot down a flying object, or any object for that matter, on our territory, in our airspace, then I think people will seriously regret it if they commit such a blatant violation of our territorial integrity, of our sovereignty." Though he did not specify which nations or incidents he was referring to, the comment appeared to respond to reports of discussions among NATO allies about intercepting missiles or drones near the alliance's eastern flank. Lavrov's warning highlighted Moscow's readiness to interpret such actions as provocations with potentially grave consequences. The press briefing at the UN headquarters unfolded in a measured yet tense atmosphere. Lavrov, a seasoned diplomat known for his sharp rhetoric, fielded questions with his characteristic composure. Seated alongside him, Maria Zakharova listened intently, occasionally noting points as journalists pressed the Russian minister for details on his accusations. Images from the event showed Lavrov speaking at the UN podium earlier in the day as delegates from various countries listened with expressions ranging from attentive to skeptical. The Russian delegation, including Permanent Representative Vasily Nebenzia and Deputy Ambassador Dmitry Polyansky, appeared somber throughout the session. Lavrov's appearance was part of a broader effort by Moscow to shape the international conversation about the war in Ukraine and the security order in Europe. By focusing on Germany's military posture, Russia sought to tap into the enduring sensitivity surrounding Berlin's wartime history. Analysts note that Germany, under Chancellor Merz, has shifted markedly in its security policy since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Berlin has significantly increased defense spending and committed to providing military aid to Kyiv, moves that would have been politically unthinkable a decade earlier. Lavrov's rhetoric aimed to portray these decisions not as responses to Russian aggression, but as part of a deeper, historically familiar pattern of militarism. Reactions to Lavrov's comments were divided. Some diplomats at the UN dismissed the remarks as an attempt to deflect attention from Russia's own actions in Ukraine. Others expressed unease about the escalating cycle of accusations and counter-accusations between Moscow and Western capitals. For Russia, linking today's policy debates to the memory of World War II serves a dual purpose. It frames contemporary geopolitical struggles as a moral battle and seeks to isolate Germany diplomatically within Europe. For Germany and its allies, the charge of reviving Nazism is viewed as a distortion meant to justify Moscow's aggressive policies and rally domestic support. Lavrov's statements reflect a moment of profound mistrust between Russia and the West. His remarks at the UN signaled that Moscow sees Berlin's defense posture not as a pragmatic response to changing security needs, but as evidence of deeper, more threatening intentions. This framing raises the stakes in Europe's ongoing security debates. As Germany moves to fulfill its pledge to boost military spending to meet NATO's 2% GDP target and modernize its armed forces, Moscow is likely to continue portraying these steps as aggressive. The confrontation between these narratives, one of deterrence versus one of alleged remilitarization, is set to shape diplomatic exchanges in the months ahead. The press conference ended without new announcements of policy or initiatives. Yet the tone and content of Lavrov's remarks underscored that Russia intends to challenge Western countries not only on the battlefield in Ukraine, but also in the arena of historical memory and political legitimacy. Observers at the UN said the speech and subsequent press conference revealed Moscow's determination to cast current geopolitical tensions as a continuation of a historic struggle. For Russia, the past remains a powerful rhetorical weapon, one it wields to question the motives of its adversaries and to justify its own stance on international issues. As delegates departed the conference hall, many reflected on the stark reminder that 80 years after the end of World War II, the shadows of that conflict still loom large over European politics.